Okay, so I actually started the script for this video before the Honkai Star Rail critique one and originally planned to post it first, but my priorities got heavily skewed because scolding Hoyoverse is my favorite pastime. Anyways, back to our regular scheduled OC yappery. I've talked about Fate System a couple times now, so it's time for something new. First though, let's get through the background context stuff. As I've mentioned before, I was a huge Lalin's Curse fan, especially from 2019 to around like 2023. I say was very loosely because like I still love Lalin's Curse a lot. That comic that comic changed oh my goodness. That comic changed the trajectory of my life. Why did I put those together? And I whatever. It was only natural for the hyperfixation to eventually go dormant, especially with LC's 4-year hiatus that I had to fill in with my own fan work before I eventually moved on to other things. But then, in August 2024, Isaki herself descended upon us like an angel from the heavens to tell us that Lalin's Curse was gonna be cancelled. But it was set for a reboot with new designs, a new storyline, etc., which will be released in 10 years. I'll be honest, I'm still not sure if that's an exact number or just an estimate based on the speed she'd like to work at, but theatrics aside, I'm just happy Isaki was able to get away from Webtoon with their story intact. I could be old and grey and I'd still be sat for the Lalin Curse reboots, or whatever the new name will be. It's apparently gonna be set in a different Spanish town, but I forgot what it's called. Anyways, it was still a really exciting day in the fandom with the news, the season 2 art that Isaki shared in the Discord, and the server being like crazy active. Friends I hadn't heard from in years were revived for this party. It was really something. And all that excitement is what motivated me to draw this fan art of my favorite characters by leaps and bounds, Toby and David, with several extra leaps for Toby. I have drawn, analyzed, and talked about these two more times than I could even begin to count, and Toby especially was such a massive hyperfixation that it was a common joke between me and my friends that he might as well be my OC instead. Like he's just mine. I took custody and it was just given to me, you know? And one day I was like, huh. Making OCs based off of Toby and David and repurposing one of my many AUs for them isn't such a bad idea. Basically, I had a Ghost Toby AU where Toby is a ghost. The original version had it so that he grew up somewhere else in Lalin before his car crash death where he lost his memories, and only met David after months of lonely drifting. Since David was the first person Toby had ever encountered who could see him, they quickly became friends and just kind of goofed off together. I didn't really have a solid storyline for this, just silly fun and occasional angst. The secondary version, the one I'm basing the new story on, is the one where Toby and David did know each other beforehand, just like in canon. But after Toby's death, he, again, lost all his memories, so David, still the only person who can see his ghost, decided to help him recover those memories and or pass on to the afterlife, whichever comes first. Okay, with all that aside, now we can move on to talking about my new OCs and their version of the story, which I titled Dear Avery, which I am putting in the title, so you probably already knew that. Just quick warning, this story, of course, revolves around the topic of death, but it also touches on some much heavier stuff, so please keep the following content warnings in mind. Similar to my Fate System videos, this one involved some improv because this story isn't fully developed yet. Some plot points would be kind of vague and others I had to come up with while scripting just to fill in the gaps. And I barely have any characters aside from the main two figured out yet, so please bear with me. Anyways, we're starting off with the one and only Avery Lee, the one I based off of David. Fun fact, they're one of those OCs whose name and design came naturally to me, like I spent 2 seconds thinking about it and boom, I already knew what I wanted him to look like and what they'd be called. I mean, I might still tweak their design later, but we'll see. Anyways, Avery is just a silly little guy, honestly. As a parallel for David's love for stars, space, and aliens, Avery's infamous hyperfixation is his love for birds, which is actually a decision I made based on a pun, because you know how I just said Avery's name came naturally? Oh my goodness. You know how I just said Avery's name came naturally? Well, the other character, Damian with an A, gave me a much harder time, and the main reason I decided on that name and that spelling is because I realized it can be combined. It's not even that funny. It can be combined into avian, you know, like birds. Anyways, Avery's really upbeat and passionate about every little thing, from their aforementioned interest in birds to just having a good time all the time. They're also very absent-minded sometimes, with a frequent tendency to lose track of time and not pay enough attention to other people's moods and needs, either because he genuinely didn't notice anything off or he was just scared of saying the wrong thing. which definitely won't be a detriment later. Anyways, because of their lively personality, Avery had lots of friends at their school and around their small town of, I don't know, Winbury. But undoubtedly, their closest friend was Damian. They'd been friends slash neighbors since they were kids, both being 17 now, and wherever one was, the other was rarely far behind. They'd always been the kind of pair where Avery was the one leading every conversation and befriending every classmate, while Damian was content with quietly tagging along. As long as he was with Avery, he was happy. Their lives were fairly average since not much goes on in that town, but it was all fine for a bit. I don't know if anyone still needs spoiler warnings for Omori in the big 2025, but in case of incasity, as we say, just know that it's mentioned at this timestamp. The fact that Omori is relevant to this is probably alarming. Anyways, next up is our second main character, David. Oh my, I almost said David. Oh my gosh. Our second main character, Damian Aga. Like I said earlier, he's kind of the opposite of Avery. He was a major introvert who rarely went out of his way to socialize, but he was still very polite generally and enjoyed hanging out with a small group of people he was friends with. Most people who knew Damian liked him for how loyal and compassionate he was, and the way he always made sure everyone else was doing okay. So you can imagine how much his sudden death shocked everyone in town. Okay, so here's the general plot of Dear Avery. It starts with Avery lamenting over how it had been a few weeks since Damien's funeral. He had died from falling off a bridge somewhere on the edge of town, and the police investigation ruled that it was a suicide. Naturally, this is an extremely difficult conclusion for anyone to accept, speaking from experience. And Avery took it really hard, practically torturing himself, thinking about every sign he missed and everything he could have done to quote unquote save Damien. For a long time, Avery didn't even have the heart to revisit his grave, but finally pulled himself together and went to drop off some flowers. And it's during that trip that they encountered Damien's ghost. Obviously, Avery freaks out and assumes they're hallucinating out of grief, but that alarm turns to confusion when Damien asks who they are. By some weird afterlife circumstance, Damien had completely lost his memories from when he was alive, and he didn't even seem to realize he was dead. This whole situation gives Avery a lot to think about because, like, what are you supposed to do when you meet your best friend's amnesia ghost? But at some point, they thought, don't ghosts usually linger in the living world when they have unfinished business or overwhelming regrets or just something that went terribly wrong during their death? The more Avery thought about it, the more the situation just didn't sit quite right. Did Damien actually kill himself, or was that just a cover up for murder? Dead set on that assumption, Avery takes it upon himself to help Damien's ghost recover his memories and figure out what really happened on that bridge. The actual investigation definitely needs a lot of refinement, but in terms of layout, the story from then on will be a bunch of flashbacks intertwined with the present to show the last few weeks of Damien's life and slowly piece the full thing together. This is one of my favorite tropes, by the way, because the looming dread you feel from already knowing something bad is gonna happen and having to witness the lead up without knowing when exactly the will strike is really something else. Space Boy is another webtoon I love, and it did this sort of thing in the most devastating way imaginable. If you know, you unfortunately know. Anyways, these flashbacks reveal a lot of things about Damien's life that he endured in silence, such as his parents' divorce that led to his mom's depressive spiral, the way he constantly felt forgotten even by his dearest friends, and intense bullying from older boys at his school that were now Avery's prime suspects. By the way, Avery is the only one who can see Damien's ghost because I don't know. That's just how it was in the original AU, and I still don't have a specific reason for it. So he takes on this investigation as discreetly as possible so he doesn't look like he's losing his mind. This next section is technically major spoilers, but also same with Fate System. I don't really care about sharing spoilers since it'll likely be a long time before I actually do anything substantial with the story. So just make sure you forget everything I said before then. After a lot of investigating and memory recovery, Damien soon remembers the most important piece of the puzzle and leads Avery to his bedroom where he finds a box deep inside his closet. Inside it are two things: Damien's journal and a stack of letters. The most recent journal entries talk about the same things the flashbacks revealed and go into more detail about Damien's depression and his belief that he could never open up about it to anyone because of his quote unquote role as everyone else's anchor. How could he dump his problems on others when everyone already had bigger worries? What if he ruined their perception of him? Would anyone even care about what he's going through? The journal was filled with stuff like that, the entries getting fewer and further between. The last one, written just hours before his death, was the last thing Avery wanted to read. Confirmation from Damien himself that he did intend to fall off that bridge. confirmation that he believed death was the only way he could find peace anymore, and he didn't think his absence would make much of a difference. This is why Omori is relevant here. The story is also inspired by my friend saying that Mari's death would have been even more impactful if it was an actual suicide, rather than a murder that was disguised as one. I thought this was a really interesting angle, so I decided to try out a spin on it. Moving on from the journal as if that wasn't bad enough, Avery looks at the letters next and realizes that all of them are addressed to him. You see now why this story is called Dear Avery? Based on To All the Boys I've Loved Before and another idea from my Lalin's Curse days, it turns out Damian had been writing secret letters about how deeply important Avery was to him and all the ways he admired and wished to be more like him, the type of person that others naturally gravitate towards and could never forget. Letters about how much it hurts to feel like they were drifting apart because Avery kept getting swept away by all his other friends. Damian hopes that one day he'd have the courage to send these letters instead of hiding them in his closet, but unfortunately, the newest and shortest letter was an apology for failing. A letter about how even at the end, Damian still didn't have the heart to send these because what difference would they make now? You can imagine how much Avery cried after taking this all in. It's hard to talk when you're having the worst breakdown of your life, but they admit to Damian's ghost that they felt the same way. Of course they did. And Damian meant the world to them too. It's also here that Avery admits the real reason why he was so fixated on the idea of Damian's death being a murder. In a weird way, it was easier to accept that conclusion than the idea that Avery had let his best friend down so horribly, because at least there was someone else to blame. I really wish I had a better conclusion for all this, but like I said, this story is still super underdeveloped. So something Avery slowly but surely comes to terms with the truth and learns to move on, and Damien's able to pass on and truly rest, especially after some other loose ends are tied up. Overall, a very bittersweet ending. At least in this version, because I'll be honest, I feel really bad for Damien. So I've considered making an AU where he survives his suicide attempt so he can also get a chance at healing just as he deserves. Basically, I want my boy to be happy even if it's in another life. Projecting again? Nah, never. Anyways, that's basically everything I have to say about Dare Avery right now. Hopefully, one day I'll refine it a bit more, especially into other characters, and make a follow up. Right now, the next videos I want to make are one about another pair of OCs and one where I revisit my very first YouTube video. So we'll see if I actually post them anytime soon. If you enjoyed this video though, be sure to like and subscribe and share any thoughts and ideas in the comments if any. Thank you guys once again for your support and I'll see you next time. Bye!